In this video I wanted to show a small chop saw that's suitable for wood and metal. It has carbide teeth blades. You can get abrasive blades. They have quite a few different saw blades for it. This saw is not super low end. If you are looking for something cheaper, there's a similar saw made by Arbor Freight. The blade is smaller. The blade is high-speed steel. They don't offer any carbide tipped blades, or I couldn't even find any abrasive blades for it. So that might be a little bit of a problem. One of the other big advantages that I liked over this saw is the micro adjust feature over here. It just gives a lot more precision, and the vise seems to be a little bit nicer on this. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up and we'll take a look at it. Here today we have the Proxxon KGS 80 chop saw. I just pulled it out of the box. Everything was inside of plastic bags. Inside the box were molded styrofoam supports. There were no packing beads or anything like that. So it was very well supported and very well protected. So to begin, we're just going to cut the one tie and get it out of the way. And here we have the saw. It has a safety switch. The blade will automatically retract as the saw comes down. The default blade that comes with it is good for cutting both wood and non-ferrous metals, so your brasses and your aluminums and items like that. They do make several different optional blades. This is an abrasive blade. This would be, you can use this on a lot of hardened steel and other items that you wouldn't want to use a tooth saw on necessarily. So I'll use this for cutting some drill rod and steel. The saw has a small release lever here that you pull up to allow the table to move and to lock into preset indentations. These appear to be every 15 degrees, from 0 to 45 degrees in both directions. So we're just going to leave it at 0. So here's a little bit closer view on the vise. It is self-centering, so both jaws move at the same time. It has several facets milled into the face. So we've got a step up here at the top if you're doing thinner but wider pieces to get the full availability of the blade. And then it also has a V-groove cut in it for cutting round stock. You do need to be careful because the saw can be moved where you'll be cutting into the face of the vise. So do make sure and take that precaution before you start any cutting operation. One of the other big advantages of the saw is on the back there is a knob that allows the saw to be moved left and right. So this allows you to get very close to the chuck or to make precise cutoff variances and changes. This is unique to this saw. I haven't seen this type of feature on any other small compact saw. One of the other nice features of the Proxxon is it comes with a length bar so that you can set stops and make repeated cuts to varying sizes. And with the moving head on this, you're going to be able to make very, very thin cuts, although you would have to be very careful about those thin cuts flying off and pieces coming back at you. One thing to note is when you do use this fence, obviously you can tighten it down to a specific location. Is once you have your stock measured up against the stop here and you've clamped it in your vise, you'll want to rotate this out of the way. That way the stock isn't going to bind up against the saw blade, so always make sure you do that. And right now that's moving pretty tight. It's actually spinning the entire bar. There's a small nylock nut down here on the end. I'll probably loosen that up a little bit so that arm will swing more freely. That's the basics of the saw. Pretty simple and straightforward. I will see about getting some stock and making a couple of test cuts. We're going to do a test cut. This is my very first test cut with the saw. I have a piece of round bar, 6061 T6 aluminum, locked in, tight up in the vise. The vise does have a little bit of wiggle to it, but this isn't really a precision machining operation, right? This is going to be a rough cut. Ideally, this is going to give us a little bit better cut than, say, a hand hacksaw, particularly if you're not very skilled with a hand hacksaw. And then we'll have to face it off or do other operations on it later, obviously. So in order to get started, you have to pull this lever forward to lower the head of the saw, and then press this button to engage the power. It's a momentary press, so you have to press and hold it. It isn't an on-off switch. The other thing I'll say is I did just turn on the motor after I plugged it in, and it is quite loud, so I'm going to probably turn down the volume levels here. So that cut quite easily. As expected, it's throwing chips all over the place. The cut quality on it is actually really good. That's a better quality cut than my metal bandsaw makes in material like this. So that would be quite easy to face off. Okay, so now I have a piece of 1-inch square bar stock. I'm also 6061 and I believe T6, I didn't check. So we're going to see how well it cuts through this. So I went through that pretty quickly. Again, a very, very nice cut. I'm actually quite surprised at the cut quality on this. This end here is a bandsaw cut, and that's with coolant. I'm not sure how well the camera at this distance is going to pick up the differences, but this is definitely a much rougher surface on the bandsaw. This is not smooth, but it's definitely much, much smoother than the bandsaw cut. A little bit of flashing on the bottom. Break that off with a file fairly easily. Not uncommon, regardless of the type of saw you're using, to have a little bit of flashing that needs to be taken care of, or some burrs. This thing throws metal everywhere. That's really all I can say. I mean, I've probably got shavings in a 3 or 4 foot radius around me at least. So this is not a very clean tool to use. Regardless of how you enclose it, you're still going to have the front open and probably some distance along the side. So get ready to vacuum up a lot of chips. This 1-inch bar, as far as thickness, is pretty much the capacity. From what I can just tell, you'll check the manual or the website for specifics to be sure. But as this was coming down, I was coming close to the motor housing before I completed the cut. So probably not going to be able to go much thicker than that. Also, I did try a piece of 1-inch round bar stock in here previously, and with where the V-jaws are set, it didn't want to clamp very well. So these are some longer pieces, probably 2-3 feet long. So it wanted to tilt out and to fall down. You could definitely fix that with getting a support and putting it under here. And then I would also recommend, as you saw in that last video, the saw walking a little bit. So screw it down to a baseboard to give it more lateral stability. Put some little rubber feet on it. That might help with some of the noise. So I've got a piece of brass in here, a 3/8 inch square rod. This is 360 brass, I believe. We're going to see how it cuts differently, see if it does any different than aluminum. Again, quite the nice cut. Fairly smooth as well, definitely smoother than the aluminum. And again, for comparison, there's a bandsaw cut, but it was a faster cut. But really pleased with the quality of these cuts. Smaller chips on the brass. I'm not really pushing this or trying to force it. One thing you may notice is when I start the cuts, it appears to wander, but that's just the guard. The guard has some wiggle to it. And I might see if there's a way to tighten that up or to fix that. The blade itself is tracking perfectly straight. The machine is very solid. There's very little movement that I can feel. So I would say it's going to be pretty accurate once set up and calibrated. Okay, so I've unplugged the saw. Definitely something you want to do with this because it'd be far too easy to bump that switch. And we're going to go through changing the blade. So one screw and the cover will pivot out of the way. Okay, so there is no arbor lock on this saw. So you'll have to use a wrench on the back of an arbor and then the hex key. And these saws are reverse threaded, and that's so the blade doesn't spin off when in use. One screw, an arbor washer, and then the blade comes right off. So this is the standard blade that comes on it. It's a 80 tooth, again carbide tipped. So now that we have the carbide tip blade removed, we're going to put on a resin blade. This also came from Proxxon. It's part number 28729. It's listed as their synthetic resin bonded cutoff wheel, also commonly known as an abrasive wheel. No direction to these, no teeth, there's no label even on it. So we simply drop it onto the arbor. The arbor washer, and remembering that the thread is reversed, and then just snug that on there. Make sure and replace the guard screw. So I've got some oil hardening drill rod in here now. This is 3/32 of an inch in diameter. I'm going to go ahead and plug the saw back in. Now this is something that'd be quite easy to cut on, say with a Dremel tool or a small rotary cutoff tool using their abrasive wheel. But we're going to try to see how well this guy does. So quite easy. A little bit of flash on it. Looks like there might have been a little bit of blade wander as well. We'll try a larger piece to see how that works out. So now I've chucked a piece of 3/8 inch drill rod in here using the abrasive wheel. This would obviously take a little bit longer to get through. With the Dremel tool you might get some bogging down because this is some pretty hard stuff here. This is, I'd say, the hardest that I usually cut in. Okay, so that didn't take very long to get through. Obviously with the abrasive wheel, you're going to get some fine grit, not really chips. So this is a dirty operation. You don't want to be doing this type of cutting along with grinding and around your precision machines like your mill and your lathe. So do this in a different area to help keep that stuff out of there. Now, that is still quite warm, as expected. But it cut through there, and I was pushing pretty hard on the motor to see if I could bog it down. I think I could definitely stall it if I wanted to, but it's got some decent strength to it. That's definitely going to be a cleaner and nicer cut than what you're going to get with a handheld tool, or a hacksaw through that would not be an enjoyable experience. So I hope you've enjoyed this quick review of the Proxxon KGS 80 chop and miter saw. This I think is going to be quite the nice addition to my shop. I will bolt it down to a board and put some rubber feet on that board to give it a little more stability, and try to figure out a better way to contain the chips if I can, compared to the standard guard. Might end up just trying to box around here a little bit to see if that will contain some of the flying chips.